Lucas Bennett, once assaulted by corrupt officers, becomes internal affairs commander and quietly brings them to justice, proving true change comes from patience, courage, and accountability. Here are real stories I've witnessed, with all names changed to protect their privacy. Before we begin, let me ask you, where in the world are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop a comment below. I'm really eager to hear your story. In the bustling city of Charleston, South Carolina, a quiet storm was brewing inside the halls of the local police precinct. Lucas Bennett, a calm and resolute African-American man in his early 40s, had recently been promoted to lead the Internal Affairs Division, a role that few dared to take on. Known for his sharp mind and unyielding integrity, Lucas carried with him a past that few knew. Years ago, he had been a patrol officer, dedicated and hopeful that justice would prevail from within the system. But those ideals were shattered one rainy night when he was brutally assaulted by two corrupt officers during an off-duty encounter, a night that left scars far deeper than the physical wounds. Across the precinct, officers Jonah Reed and Mark Foster, veterans with a reputation for bending rules and turning blind eyes, rejoiced publicly after a court case dismissed charges against them in a use-of-force incident. They were arrogant, confident that the system would always protect them, and unaware that their new commander, Lucas, was the very man they had once tormented. The tension was palpable, but Lucas's calm demeanor masked a fierce determination to clean up the department from the inside out. What the precinct didn't realize was that the real reckoning had just begun. Lucas Bennett sat quietly in the courtroom as Judge Harmon delivered the verdict. Case dismissed. The air was thick with tension, but the two men in the back, Jonah Reed and Mark Foster, wore smirks that radiated confidence. They exchanged a low, mocking clap, convinced they had beaten the system once again. Jonah, broad-shouldered and brash, ran his hand through slicked-back hair, while Mark, lean with a hardened gaze, leaned back with the ease of men who'd played this game countless times. The courtroom had become their arena, and they thought they controlled it. But Lucas remained unmoved. Dressed simply in a charcoal suit, with a calm that concealed the storm within, he locked his jaw and folded his hands in his lap. This wasn't the end for him. It was only a chapter in a longer battle he was determined to win. Years before, Lucas had been a rookie cop filled with hope, working in the Charleston Police Department. He believed the badge was a symbol of justice. But that belief was shattered one stormy night. Driving home after a late shift, Lucas was pulled over by two officers, Jonah and Mark, who recognized him. Instead of camaraderie, he was met with hostility. No explanation, no mercy. Before he could even reach for his badge, they attacked him brutally, their fists fueled by hatred and entitlement. The attack left him battered and broken, but it ignited a fire inside him. After a quiet resignation from the force, Lucas poured himself into law school, fueled by a mission to fight corruption and injustice from within the legal system. Years later, now a skilled civil rights attorney, he took on cases no one else dared touch, cases against officers like Jonah and Mark. Though the courtroom dismissed his most recent attempt, Lucas wasn't defeated. He knew change required patience and strategy. He understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't anger or noise, it's quiet resolve. What no one expected was Lucas's next move. He was appointed Commander of Internal Affairs, the very division charged with rooting out corruption in the department. Suddenly, the men who had once used him as a punching bag found themselves under his watchful eye. Jonah and Mark were still living in denial, their arrogance unshaken. They believed their past deeds were safe from consequences. But Lucas, with his calm intensity and meticulous preparation, was ready to unravel their web of deceit, piece by piece. The precinct's atmosphere shifted. Lucas worked late into the nights, combing through reports, connecting dots, listening to whispers from younger officers who were too afraid to speak out openly. The old guard was about to realize that their reign of silence and intimidation was over. This was more than a battle for justice. It was a reckoning. The two men who once celebrated their freedom from accountability were now facing the man who had endured their worst and was determined to make them answer for it. The precinct break room was filled with the usual low hum of chatter and clinking coffee mugs. Jonah Reed leaned back in his chair, tossing a half-eaten donut onto a napkin, the scent of burnt coffee hanging heavy in the air. Mark Foster flipped through a sports magazine, though his eyes never really left the room. The two men were basking in their unshakable confidence, their laughter echoing off the walls. They believed they were untouchable, the kings of a broken system where loyalty outweighed justice. Nearby, Caleb Turner, a young officer barely 26, pretended to scroll through his phone but was listening intently. Everyone listened when Jonah and Mark spoke. They were the precinct's untouchables, the ones who didn't get questioned, the ones who made the real decisions behind closed doors. Jonah chuckled, recalling a street encounter from the year before. "Remember that kid in the green hoodie? The one behind the corner store?" Mark grinned. "Yeah, said he had asthma or something. Shouldn't be out selling weed if he can't even breathe." Their laughter was cold, a chilling reminder of the abuse of power that ran deep. Caleb's hands trembled slightly. He stood and quietly left the room, unwilling to share his discomfort openly. Jonah shrugged it off. "You think he's soft?" Mark smirked. "Doesn't matter. Guys like that don't last around here. Guys like us? We run this place." But things were changing. Rumors swirled around the precinct. Internal audits, whispers from the mayor's office, quiet pressure to address long-ignored corruption. Jonah and Mark scoffed at the idea, convinced it was just another political stunt that would fade away. Then, news broke. A new commander was being transferred in from outside the city, a clean-cut, sharp-eyed leader from Baton Rouge named Lucas Bennett. "The pencil pusher," Jonah mocked. "Let me guess, clipboard and all." Mark nodded. "Think he's gonna bark at us too?" Lucas wasn't the type to bark. He didn't need to. 2 days later, tension filled the precinct. Phones rang non-stop, offices buzzed with hushed conversations, and a palpable unease settled over the staff. A fresh white placard bearing the name Commander Lucas Bennett stood prominently in the briefing room. Jonah and Mark arrived with their usual swagger, but froze as Lucas entered. Pristine uniform, steady gaze, unshakable calm. The same man they had assaulted years ago, the same man they had laughed off in court, was now their superior. Without raising his voice, Lucas dropped a thick manila folder on the podium. This folder contained 6 cases closed prematurely, all linked to you two. The room fell silent. Jonah's face twitched. Mark folded his arms, trying to hide his growing discomfort. Lucas's words cut through the silence like a blade. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to clean house. No threats, no shouts, just quiet, cold resolve that promised reckoning." For the first time, Jonah and Mark understood the storm they had unleashed. The man they thought was broken was now the force that would bring them down. Lucas Bennett's rise to power wasn't marked by loud declarations or dramatic confrontations. Instead, it was the quiet shift in control, the subtle dismantling of a corrupt culture from the inside that made his presence so formidable. Jonah Reed and Mark Foster, once brash and untouchable, now found themselves in uncharted territory, a place where silence and patience were weapons stronger than any fist. For years, Jonah and Mark had thrived on intimidation, on the chaos of confrontation. Their power came from fear. Fear that silenced victims. Fear that bent rules. Fear that kept the truth buried beneath layers of lies and loyalty. They were masters of the game, knowing exactly which evidence disappeared, which witnesses turned mute, and which lawyers folded under pressure. But Lucas played a different game. His calm demeanor unsettled them. He didn't yell or raise his voice. He didn't threaten or retaliate with aggression. Instead, he worked quietly, methodically. He spent nights poring over files, cross-referencing reports, listening to the whispered confessions of younger officers like Caleb Turner, who were desperate to break free from the toxic cycle. Jonah caught himself watching Lucas in meetings, how he controlled the room with a steady voice and precise words, never wasting energy on empty threats. Mark noticed Lucas avoiding direct eye contact with them, as if they didn't exist, but the effect was the same. They felt watched, exposed, vulnerable. The arrogance that had once fueled their bravado now made them careless. They joked louder, acted bolder, thinking the old rules still applied. But every joke was recorded, every careless act noted. Lucas had seen the cracks in their armor long before they appeared. He knew their patterns: the missing body cam footage, the altered timestamps, the false reports. And he used this knowledge as leverage. The precinct was changing. The whispers grew louder. Officers who once laughed with Jonah and Mark now glanced sideways. Some even nodded with quiet respect to Lucas. Fear was no longer one-sided. Jonah and Mark's confidence began to erode. The realization that their unchecked reign was ending was terrifying. For the first time, they had to consider the consequences of their actions, not just the legal repercussions, but the loss of power and identity. Meanwhile, Lucas remained focused on the mission. His perspective had evolved beyond personal revenge. This was about accountability, about restoring integrity to a system that had long been compromised. He understood that justice was not served in a single courtroom verdict, but in the slow, relentless pursuit of truth. This shift in power was not just a change of command. It was a change in perspective for the entire department. And at its center stood Lucas Bennett, the man who once wore the same badge, endured the same abuse, and now wielded the authority to make things right. With Lucas Bennett firmly in command of internal affairs, the precinct began to experience a subtle but powerful shift. This was more than a change in leadership. It was a new opportunity to uproot the deeply embedded corruption that had long been tolerated. Lucas knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was prepared to use every resource at his disposal to bring justice and restore trust. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from unexpected sources: younger officers like Caleb Turner. Frightened and unsure, Caleb approached Lucas one late evening, his voice trembling as he revealed the truth about Jonah Reed and Mark Foster's misconduct. It was a risky move for Caleb, who had witnessed firsthand the brutality and cover-ups, but had remained silent out of fear. Lucas listened carefully, providing a safe space for Caleb to share his experiences. With this vital testimony and others like it, Lucas began to build airtight cases, compiling evidence that could no longer be ignored or buried. He meticulously organized reports, timestamps, and witness statements, ensuring every detail was documented. Meanwhile, Jonah and Mark remained oblivious to the full extent of the investigation. Their confidence, once unshakable, slowly began to waver. They continued their routines, cracking jokes in the break room, lifting weights in the gym, pretending that nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, anxiety gnawed at them. Lucas leveraged his position not just to punish wrongdoers, but to create an environment where honesty and integrity were rewarded. He encouraged officers to come forward, assuring them protection and support. The culture of fear was slowly giving way to one of accountability. City officials and community leaders took notice. Lucas's presentations, backed by undeniable evidence, sparked public hearings and renewed demands for reform. The Civilian Review Board convened, and the spotlight was finally shining where it was long overdue. For Lucas, this was a moment of vindication, but also of responsibility. He knew there were more cases, more officers hiding behind badges to evade justice. The work was far from over. Yet, with each case brought to light, he was closer to fulfilling the promise he made to himself on that rainy night years ago, to be the change the system desperately needed. Jonah and Mark's days of impunity were numbered. The new era was here, and with it came hope, not just for Lucas, but for the entire community yearning for real justice. Lucas Bennett's transformation was profound, not just in title, but in spirit. The boy who once wore the badge with pride, only to have it shattered by betrayal and violence, had grown into a leader fueled by quiet resilience and unwavering determination. Each late night poring over files, every meeting with scared officers, and every public hearing was a testament to his unyielding commitment to justice. His journey was not without personal cost. Lucas often wrestled with memories of that brutal night, the pain, the humiliation, the silence he had kept for years. But instead of letting those ghosts consume him, he channeled them into strength. He learned that true power came not from aggression or intimidation, but from patience, strategy, and the courage to stand firm when it mattered most. The precinct felt this change too. Lucas's presence was a reminder that accountability was possible, even in the face of deeply entrenched corruption. Younger officers like Caleb Turner found hope in Lucas's leadership, inspired to break the cycle of silence and fear that had defined their workplace for so long. Lucas didn't just enforce rules, he inspired a culture shift. His calm but firm approach encouraged officers to reflect on their actions, to choose integrity over convenience. He held himself to the highest standard, never allowing frustration or bitterness to cloud his judgment. Jonah Reed and Mark Foster, once arrogant and untouchable, now found themselves isolated and vulnerable. Their attempts to intimidate or dismiss the investigation fell flat against Lucas's steady resolve. They realized that the man they had once beaten was no longer a victim. He was their reckoning. Through this process, Lucas also learned the value of patience and perspective. He understood that change would not come overnight, and that justice was often a slow grind rather than a sudden victory. But with each small win, the suspension of corrupt officers, the opening of new investigations, the support of the community, he felt the tide turning. Lucas Bennett had become more than just a commander. He was a symbol of hope, a beacon for those who believed that justice could prevail even in the darkest corners. His growth was a powerful reminder that the scars of the past could be transformed into the foundation for a better future. The precinct was quieter now, but the air was thick with change. Lucas Bennett stood tall, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing he was doing the right thing, no matter the cost. The once untouchable Jonah Reed and Mark Foster sat on the sidelines, their names tarnished and reputations crumbling under the weight of accountability. At a public hearing, Lucas addressed the community and the press. Clad in a sharp navy suit, his voice steady and resolute, he spoke not just as a commander, but as a man who had lived the struggle from both sides of the badge. "I used to wear the same uniform," he said. "I believed in what it stood for. But a badge doesn't protect character. It reveals it." There were no cheers or applause, just a solemn silence that spoke volumes. The room was filled with faces marked by hope, fear, and the desperate need for change. Lucas knew the fight wasn't over. The system still had cracks, still sheltered those who abused their power. But the foundation for real reform was laid, brick, by courage and persistence. Jonah and Mark, now stripped of their badges and suspended, were shadows of the men who once ruled the precinct. Their defiance had turned to desperation. For the first time, they faced the consequences of their actions in ways they had never imagined. But Lucas didn't revel in their downfall. He saw it as a necessary step toward justice. Outside the courtroom, Lucas found a moment with Caleb Turner, the young officer whose bravery had helped expose the truth. Caleb's gratitude was quiet but profound. "I don't know if I could have spoken up without you," he admitted. Lucas smiled gently. That's how change begins. One voice, then two, then many. As he walked away, Lucas understood that justice was not a destination, but a journey. It was a daily commitment to doing what's right even when it's hard. The scars from his past fueled his resolve, but it was his hope for the future that kept him moving forward. In a world where power often shields the wrongdoers, Lucas Bennett's story was a beacon. A reminder that true justice comes not from shouting louder, but from standing taller and longer. It was proof that one person, armed with courage and integrity, could make a difference, even against the odds. The fight for accountability was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope that the scales might finally begin to balance. Power without accountability becomes a dangerous weapon that can destroy lives and erode trust in the very institutions meant to protect us. Silence, whether born of fear, complacency, or resignation, only allows injustice to thrive. True change requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to stand firm even when the odds seem overwhelming. Lucas Bennett's journey teaches us that the most powerful victories are often quiet, deliberate, and long-term. It's not about shouting louder, but about standing stronger and longer, holding those in power responsible for their actions. In our own lives, this lesson translates to speaking up against wrongdoing, even when it feels risky or uncomfortable. Whether at work, in our communities, or within institutions, silence can be complicity. By fostering environments where truth and integrity are valued, and by supporting those brave enough to speak out, we help create systems that serve justice, not corruption. Accountability starts with each individual choice to act ethically and courageously. Like Lucas, change begins when one voice refuses to stay silent, inspiring others to follow. Together, even the most entrenched problems can be confronted and dismantled.